we'll start the securing web applications module. I hope you have had enough time to do the labs. At the end of this, of the system administration chapter, I will actually ask you if you have any questions so we can complete this module. And then if you have questions regarding the labs or anything that we have covered during this module, feel free to ask these questions. Again, I'm going to unmute all your mics so you can
Good morning, Harold. How are you?
of your microphones. You just want to speak. You just have to open your mic. Okay? Please mute your mic right now because otherwise everyone will hear you.
Yes, I'm here. So just want to give you a quick call and
I guess WebEx has some issues with the microcontrol. Well, we will figure it out. All right, so let's begin with the system administration chapter. Yesterday, the last thing that we saw was the configuration of services with the possibility to configure HTTP, HTTPS services. We've seen the configuration of SSL extensions like HSTS. Today, we will finish the module regarding the WAF basics with some concepts that might be needed, especially if you want to be compliant with some regulations or if you want to, for example, monitor the WAF, back up the configuration of the WAF, and so on. The first topic that we're going to cover is called role-based administration. With role-based administration, what you can do is to create specific administrators for your web application firewall. Now, why is this needed? You might need this to be compliant with some regulations. We saw that when you log into the WAF from the web interface, you use the admin user. All right? The admin user has the power to change everything in the WAF configuration, also to reboot the machine and so on. This might be what you want. So you're going to give the admin user to the system administrator of your company, the network administrator, or whatever. But this might not be the case with some companies, which might require some more granular control of what is done or who is doing what in the WAF. There are some regulations also that will tell you that you must be able to track down what was changed in the configuration, who changed it, and when it was changed. Okay, so in order to track down who changed what, you can use the role-based administration feature. This will allow you to use an internal database of users, of administrators, or an external, or import these administrators from an external database. You then assign a role to these users. Okay, a role is made of objects and operations. The objects are basically what the user or the administrator can see and change. Okay, so we have different services. So you can say, okay, for example, I am an ISP. I have customer A, customer B, customer C. Customer A can only see service 1, 2, 3. Customer B can only see service 4. Customer C can see the rest of the services. Okay, so you can basically change the web interface, change the management interface of the WAF based on which administrator account you are using to log in. The same is for security policies that we will see today and authentication services. The same is valid also for the web interface. You can completely change the web interface of the WAF. So you can remove sections, you can remove pages in the web interface by creating a specific role and then assign this role to the administrator. If you want, you have operations that you can assign to these objects. Like, for example, you can have a help desk team that can only read specific services. Okay, so for example, they can check the configuration of service, they can check the logs, but they cannot change the configuration of the WAF. Now, role-based administration is configured in the advanced. Let me get WAF. 1 second. There we go. It's configured in the advanced admin access control page. And what you can do here is basically you can use 8 predefined roles and assign these roles to your administrators. We have, for example, audit manager, admin, of course, that has full power on the box, service manager, policy managers. You cannot actually delete or change these roles. If, for example, I will click on details on the service manager, you will see what this role can do. Services, it can read and write on all services. Security policies, read and write on all security policies. Authentication services, none. So it is not able to actually access the authentication services. It can check the libraries and configure multiple IP addresses on the interfaces. Some denied screens, so these screens will not be shown. All the basic page, basic section is not shown. Access control is not shown. The advanced section is not shown for this role. Now, how do you assign this role to an administrator? Here you have the option to import the admins from an LDAP server or a Radius server, or you can create a local administrator. Okay, you just have to put username, password, and then you assign the role. Okay, like network manager or again service manager. Okay, so when then you will log in with this new role, the interface will change and everything will change according to your permissions. If you want, you can create a new role by clicking on Add Administration Role, and what you will see is basically the configuration of the WAF, and you can say, all right, this is a new role. It's, for example, customer A. And customer A can only read the configuration of bad store. It can only read the default security policy. Doesn't have any permissions on the authentication services. I will not allow him to see the basic page altogether, and so on. Okay, so you see this is basically the whole management interface of the WAF, and you can click what can be shown or not to that specific role. Okay, so then the user will then have specific permissions in the WAF. Again, you might need this for some regulations also. How do you check if everything is okay in the WAF? Well, we have 3 sources that we can use to get this information. We have the dashboard, which is basically the landing page that you see after you log in into the WAF. We can use notifications, and we can use SNMP. I will show you the dashboard in a live WAF. Notifications are basically messages that are sent by the system in case something happened. And SNMP, you can use SNMP version 2C and 3, and it is recommended that you use v3 because you can use encryption and authentication. Okay. There is a question. System administration is same on all models. You mean the admin access control or the topics in this section? All right. You mean about features? Honestly, I don't remember if the lower models have all the features, but we can actually check it right away. Okay, we can actually go to barracuda.com/products. That's my intercepting proxy. Let's zap that it's still active here. So that's why you saw the certificate. So let's go to Web Application Firewall. And right, let's change from German to English. if you go on resources, this is actually data sheets, and yeah, let's open this one. So let me check on the feature list. I don't know what's the trouble of rendering a page on these Windows systems. Anyway, yes, it seems that there is no restriction on the administration part. Okay, so as you can see, the only restrictions that you might have are on models 360 and 460, which don't have all the features enabled on the WAV, but we have some restrictions on the application delivery with caching, compression, load balancing, and so on. vSites, this is advanced routing, it's vSites basically, and antivirus and so on. So no, there is no restriction on the administration part. And there is another question. Can you show how to create an admin for a single vSite? Yes, let's actually try. So I will add an administrator role. Okay, and I'm going to select, for example, the default vSite. Okay, for example, in read and write. And now this customer A can only manage this default vSite. So this is basically how you do it. Otherwise, you select vSite 2, and that's it. You are the customer is managing just that vSite, and of course all the other services. If you want, you can be more granular, and for some reasons you might say only this vSite and this service. So the WAF is very elastic in this case. Right. So for the dashboard, let's go to basic. Actually, let's go to waf.barracuda.com. You can access this system from your local workstation. And this is a publicly available web application firewall. This is that is deployed, and you can basically log in with the guest account. The good thing about this WAF is that it has some services configured, and you can see what is happening when you expose web applications on the internet. Okay, so this is the dashboard, again, the landing page after the login screen. And the first thing that you see is the heat map. So for all the attacks, you see the map of the world and basically where the attacks were originating. Like, for example, we had 4,500 attacks from the US. We got, what's this? Oh, wow, 2,000 attacks from Spain. We got 2,000 attacks from China, and so on. So basically, this is like an overview of the world with the origin of the attack. This is a hardware appliance, so you have information about the appliance hardware. So if you click detail, you can actually see if the system, for example, temperature and fan are okay. If this would have been a virtual appliance or a cloud instance, this appliance hardware here would not be shown for obvious reasons. We got the system load, so this is how you can monitor how the system is performing. The firmware storage, so basically when you're downloading and applying firmware updates. What is the operating mode, or the operation mode, proxy or bridge? The data path status. Remember the data path? It is basically the connection between the WAN and LAN port for a two bridge, two proxy ARM deployment, or for the WAN deployment, it's just a WAN port. Okay, this is a cluster. So basically, we have two units, WAF Demo 1 and WAF Demo 2. Okay, WAF Demo 1 is the active one because we have a green tick here, and the blue tick means that this is a passive unit. So we have an active-passive cluster. Cloud control we'll talk about in a minute. We have an overview of the services. We've got 6 services, 2 are down, 9 servers, 3 are down. Also, we have an overview of the subscription, the interfaces, and all the attacks with the bandwidth, memory utilization, and so on. For the attacks, this is an interactive graph, so you can, for example, just filter out all the attacks except SQL injection attacks. So you can actually see how many attacks you get I think it's every 15 minutes. And for some of this data, you can create live graphs. Okay, so you can actually see, for example, what is the memory utilization of the web. Okay, if you want to configure SNMP, you have to go into the administration page, and right in the middle, you got the SNMP manager. You have to enable the agent, and you can configure the community string, the version, or the authentication plus the encryption if you use v3. You can also configure a trap receiver that will basically receive passively all the SNMP traps from the WAF. So this is for passive monitoring systems. So this is for active monitoring systems. Okay. Notifications. Notifications are basically email messages that are sent by the WAF to the system contacts. Okay, I will show you where to configure email addresses in the WAF. And some messages are sent by default, like, for example, if there is a CPU utilization that is more than 85% in 30 minutes, you're going to get a message. Okay, hey, there's something wrong in this machine, it's overloaded, or something is not working properly. Or you can configure your thresholds. You can configure thresholds globally or per service. All right, so you can say, I want to be advised with an email message if I have more than 100 cross-site script attacks in the WAF. It doesn't matter where these attacks were performed, which service was affected. I want to be advised. Or you can say, in this particular service, I want to be advised if I have more than 10 cross-site scripting attacks. Okay, so again, this might be useful, especially when you want to know what is happening in the WAF without accessing the web interface. Notifications are configured in the basic notification page, and the global thresholds are divided in hardware threshold, and the defaults are always 85%. Okay, and the global threshold for the attacks are actually specified here. You have to put a number. Then we have the per service configuration. Like, for example, here we have bed store secure, and you can start typing like a cross-site script, and then the system will actually allow you to complete the event type, and then the threshold will be 80. Or, for example, for this, you can have SQL injection in a parameter, and then again the threshold is 10. Okay, so this is basically where you configure all your thresholds. Also, the system will send an email if one of the internal modules will have some problems. All right, so for example, if the NTP module cannot sync the clock for some reasons, then you can be advised if you click email here. Or if the caching module has some problems, again, cluster manager if you have a failover. Now, if for some of these modules, they are, let's say, you can understand what they do. From others, like STM wrapper, okay, it's very hard to guess what an STM wrapper does, all right? So for this, check campus, okay? We have a page with all the references, with the names of the modules and what they do, okay? Now they have started to write the name in a more comprehensive way, like web authentication, web translation, and so on. But again, if you want to more information about these thresholds, check campus. Now, if we go to the administration page and you scroll down, you will see that for email notifications, you can basically specify the SMTP server and the system alerts and the system contact. Okay, system alerts are basically issued by the WAF, by the machine. So if there is a problem, for example, or if the thresholds are busted. System contact is basically when you have communication by Barracuda Central, like there is a new firmware available for the web application firewall. If you want, you can update your box. Okay, so this is the difference. This is where you configure the emails. Now, for logging, we have 5 different logs in the web application firewall. The first log is the network firewall logs. Network firewall logs is used by network access lists. So in the network security groups, you can, for example, select an access list, and then you select the log checkbox, and everything is logged in the network firewall logs. Audit logs tracks down everything that is changed by an administrator. So here you can find, for example, Matteo logged in and this time of the day, and it changed the configuration of this service. All right, this is the audit logs. Audit logs are only created for admins, not for users, not for the users that will use your application. Okay, tomorrow we will see the user authentication and access control. That's another story. Okay, this is just for administration. Then we have system logs, which are used by the system when he has to log something like NTP synchronization failed. Okay, you will find this in the system logs. Access logs, this is basically a log that tracks down all the HTTP requests. It doesn't matter if the request was successful or not successful. HTTP request will always be logged in the access logs if you enable this in the service. By default, it is enabled. Okay, but for some reasons you can say, I don't care about this service, and then you disable the access logs. And finally, we have the web firewall logs. We will use the web firewall logs a lot today. This is where you will find everything that is either blocked by the WAF or it is logged if the WAF is in passive mode. Okay, we will discuss about this today. If you want, you can create filters on your logs. So if you have, for example, multiple services, you can then pre-create your filters. So every time that you read the logs, you don't have to scroll up and down or recreate the pattern to search for your service. Okay, you create all your filters, you save your filters, and then you can recall them. For example, if I go to basic web firewall logs of the online box, as you can see here, we can create specific filters. For example, from client IP, the method is used, the client type, the country code, and here you can save the filter. Okay, so you can say this is a filter to see all the connections from Austria, for example, and you can create multiple conditions. Okay, so you can have a very complex filter and then save it, so you can then recall it whenever it's needed. If you want, you can export logs to different servers. Now, we support different protocols when we are exporting the logs from the web. The first one is the syslog. Okay, so if you have a syslog server like Splunk, like SIM, like ArcSight, you can tell the WAF, please connect to this syslog server and use this station to stream access logs. Use these other stations to stream web firewall logs. We have 8 stations, okay, from local 0 to local 7, so you can have different logs streamed to different files of your syslog. Then it's your syslog server's job to then filter, separate, and so on. We also support the AMQP or AMQPS protocol. This is a protocol that will allow you to connect the WAF to message brokers. Now, you might not know what a message broker is, so just a quick overview. A message broker is like a syslog server, but let's say more advanced. A message broker will basically allow you to receive a log, okay, from, let's say, a WAF, and then when the log is received, if there are some conditions inside this log, an event is then created that will generate a specific task. Okay, so everything is defined in the AMQP protocol, and the message broker, which can be RabbitMQ from Apache, ActiveMQ, NSQ, and so on, will take care of processing all this information and triggering all these events. Okay, so it's not for storing, it is for creating events. Then we have the connection to Microsoft Azure's Event Hub, and this is for Azure deployments. Basically now you can see more than just system is up, system is down from this Event Hub. Now, if you want, when you are configuring your WAF, you can use a function that it's called templates. Now, templates will allow you to basically export a piece of the configuration of the WAF and then re-import it in the same WAF or into another WAF. Let's say, for example, that we have our bet store services. You can basically say, I want to create similar services, so I will copy the configuration of the service with all the security configuration, and then do copy-paste, basically, of this service in the WAF, so I don't have to reconfigure everything from scratch. Okay, you can use templates to do this, or there is another case that you might have different environments, like, for example, you have a WAF that is used by web developers. When they develop the web application, they want to test what happens when the web application is behind the WAF. Now, they test everything, they change the WAF configuration, and when they will give you the green light, then you will export this configuration and import the configuration in the WAF that you have in your production line. Okay, so you don't have to, again, configure the production WAF, so this might generate problems because you might make error, and also it's going to be a problem to configure everything manually. Okay, you just export everything from the service, your policies, allow deny rules, whatever you want, to another WAF. You can also use custom templates. This is nice when you have multiple web application firewalls and you need, and they're, for example, not clustered, and you need to synchronize the configuration, okay, for some services, for example. You create a template, you import this template into multiple boxes, and then you apply the template. Okay, so then you configure multiple boxes at the same time with the same configuration. Now, templates are configured in the advanced template page. And as you can see here, we have some templates that were created already. For example, we have a service template, a rule group template, a server template. You can then download this template if you want. Yes, of course, we are guests, but you can download this template if you want, and you can then import it into this WAF again, or another WAF. Or if you want, you can use the template. When you use the template, and the system will tell you, all right, you want to use this template, what's the destination service? Okay, for example, Demo1. You click Next and say, all right, please review if this is what you really want to import. If this is OK, you then click Next, Apply, and then in this case, this will create a rule group. This is a content rule. Okay, so again, you don't have to do everything every time manually. You just save your template and then you import it in your service. As you can see, there is another section that is called factory shipped templates. Now, we are going to use this section in the future to give you the possibility to import security settings that we have created for other web applications. Okay, as we will say today, the WAF already knows how to protect some web applications like OWA, SharePoint, and so on. But there are other applications that are not included, like WordPress, Drupal, and so on, like these frameworks. Now, in the future, like as you can see here, we have now a template that is called WordPress. So if you have a website that is created using WordPress, you can just use this. Okay, we have optimized the WAF security settings in order to just use it. Okay, you don't have to care about it. Now, you can also generate reports in the WAF, so you can extract all the data that you have in the logs, and you can create different types of reports. Okay, I will not use the slide because it's useless in this case. I will just go to Basic Reports. And you basically specify the time frame, you specify the service and other conditions, and then you can basically see the report. For example, I can see the attack by category. Okay, so this is basically all the attacks, forceful browsing, protocol violation. I can click on a specific attack, and then I can click services. So I can actually see which service was the target of this attack. In this case, it's only this IP address, basically. So they are actually interactive. If you want, you can select multiple categories, okay, and then create your report. Okay, so for example, here we have PCI attacks, top attacked URLs, website traffic, and so on. All right, and you can basically send this report to email addresses using or an FTP using the PDF format or the HTML format. Okay. Now, the last things that we will see for this chapter is basically the possibility to create a backup of your configuration. So basically, it is a good practice that even if you have a cluster, you might want to back up the configuration of the WAF. So if something happened, then you can restore the configuration. This is different than templates. Template is a part of the configuration of the WAF. The backup is the whole configuration. Okay, so when you re-import the configuration on another system, most of the settings will be overwritten. What is not overwritten is, for example, the IP address of the interfaces. Okay, that is most likely set already because you are accessing the web interface. So you can basically re-import the configuration. The configuration can be stored, can be saved in the cloud, in our cloud, in an FTP server, in an SME share, or locally. Okay, and you can also encrypt it. To create configuration backups, you just go to Advanced, then you go to Backups, and basically you specify the destination and you specify the schedule. Okay, for example, every Sunday at, I don't know, 5 a.m. Okay, and this is all the saved configuration. Okay, the local configuration. Last thing is the possibility to connect the WAF to our cloud management interface. We have a portal that is called the Cloud Control that will allow you to connect multiple Barracuda products for free, and you can manage them. Okay, so you can have multiple web application firewalls connected to the Cloud Control, and you don't have to have access to the management interface of the WAF to manage the WAF. You just need to have access to the Cloud Control. The creation of the account is free, basically. You just go to bcc.barracuda.com. I will have to remove this. Okay. Go to bcc.barracuda.com. You then create a user if you don't have one. Okay. And after you create the user, you go into the WAF. You go to Cloud Control. And then you can say, I want to connect to our Cloud Control, connect to Barracuda Cloud Control, and then put your username and your password, the ones that you have specified during the creation of the user. All right? There is another option that is not part of this course, which is the connection to a local Barracuda control server. So you can have the same principle, like having a server, a central server that manages multiple boxes, and then from this server, you can then connect all the Barracuda web application firewalls. Okay? I'm sorry, but I don't have a local control server that I can show you. Okay? In the future, we will have some webinars that will explain this. All right? So do you have any questions regarding this module, this chapter, or anything that we have seen yesterday or in the labs? There is a question about templates and configuration backups. If the question is if I can use templates between different versions and configuration backups between different versions of the firmware. Now, for templates, you can actually see the compatibility. Okay, so for example, if you want to use these templates, you have to have at least a 7.9.0.0.12 firmware. We are now running version 8.1. Okay, so yes, there is a compatibility, let's say, issue. If you have, for example, 7.8, they won't work. Okay, so everything is stated in this column. For the backup, normally there are no problems if you import a backup and export the backup within the same major release. Okay, so let's say that you are running 8 or 8.1 and you have to import the backup on 8, for example. There are no known issues unless it is clearly stated on campus. Okay, so if, for example, we go from 8.1 to 8.2, and then you're going to, we're going to change something drastically in the engine of the WAF, then we will state on campus, please make sure that you do a configuration backup after the update, before the update, and you cannot import a backup that is done from 7.9, for example. Okay, so that's basically what you can have with the backup configuration, restoring a configuration on different firmwares. Okay, so normally it should work in the same major release. There is another question regarding lab 2.3. That ZAP proxy was not working even if Firefox was configured to use it. All right, so let me just open quickly the lab guide. And all right, I think, yes, it's just the beginning of the configuration. All right, so to use ZAP, all right, ZAP listens to a specific address that is localhost 8080. Now, the reasons why ZAP might not work is that maybe there is another instance of ZAP that is running. Okay, maybe you can check the task manager. Sometimes Windows leaves some stub processes running, so maybe that socket is already taken. You can also check the netstat -na netstat, and you should find that port 8000 should be port 8080 should be binded to localhost. Okay, let me see if it's port 8080 actually. So we go to tools, options, local proxy, port 8080, and the day that Windows will implement grep will be too late for everyone. Yeah, here it is, 8080. Okay, so you can check if you have this socket open in listening mode, and if it is still not working, you can make sure that you use the proxy for everyone, for all the protocols, and the port is correct. If it's still not working, I will check your computer, your workstation, when we start the next lab. Okay, so test it. If it's still not working, please let me know. Okay, so I will log into your workstation and see what's going on. Maybe we have to reboot the Windows system or do other stuff. Do you have other questions? All right. So if there are no questions, what we're going to do now is that we're going to start the Securing Web Application module. I'm going to cover just the overview, and then we're going to do a 5 minutes break. Okay? And then we will continue with the other topics of these modules. Now, this is the core module of the Web Application Firewall. In this module, we will basically cover all the configuration settings regarding the security settings of the WAF. So it is not an easy module, okay, because we have several things to cover, from security policies to website profiles and so on. So I will try to cover it today, but if that's not possible because some topics are not clear, you want me to explain, for example, loud and high rules, we will use tomorrow, okay, to finish this module like we did today. All right. So again, this is not an easy module. So if you have any questions, please write the questions in the chat, or note down the questions, and open your mics and ask me the questions. All right. Good. Now, before we start with the security settings of the Web Application Firewall, we need to cover the security models that we can use when we are configuring the firewall. Now, the security models are basically theoretical models that you can use to configure any, let's say, any security appliance. It could be a web application firewall, it could be a network firewall, it could be whatever, okay, an IPS, and so on. Now, there are two security models that you can use to configure the WAF. You can use a positive model or a negative model. Now, the positive model states that everything is blocked, so nothing is allowed unless it is explicitly allowed. Okay? So we block everything, but what we want to accept. The negative model says that only specific traffic or patterns are blocked. All the rest is allowed. All right? Now, if we analyze these two models, we will see that the positive model is a very strict security model. We block everything unless it is allowed explicitly. So, very strict model. So it is very, very complex to configure. Okay? It is not something that you do in one day. It's something that you do in 1 week, in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks. Okay? It's something very difficult to configure and also to maintain. Okay? But it is the highest level of security that you can get from the web application firewall. All right? Because, again, you are explicitly saying what that, for example, input field should receive. What is the problem? The problem is that since it is a very strict model, you have to think what are all the use cases of your web application and make sure that you cover all the use cases in that model. Otherwise, something that is explained in this diagram will happen. Now, on this page, we have a page. Sorry, in this slide, we have a page. It says first name, last name, and then we have a submit button. In our positive model, we can specify that the first name input field is an input field. The types of characters that we want in these input fields are alpha, so only letters, and then we have a maximum numbers of characters of 16. The same is for the last name. Okay, so last name, input field, so we can type in things. Type is alpha, so only letters. Maximum character is 16. Now, what happened if our poor Tommy has as a surname O'Connor? Because he comes from Ireland and his surname is O'Connor. He will try to put his first name here. He will try to put his last name here. Then he will click submit. And what the WAF will do, it will say, no way. I will not accept this. Why not? Because O'Connor in his last name has a single quote here. And since we are only allowing letters, this request will be blocked by the WAF. So positive model will generate false positives. So blocked requests that in reality are not an attack, they don't have anything wrong with them within the request, but they are blocked because of the configuration. Okay, so again, the strictest security model you can use is the positive model, but complex and also complex to maintain. Of course, let's say that the web developers will change the last name field, and now the last name is called surname. Okay. Now, if they change this input field name, you have to change the configuration of the WAF. Otherwise, the WAF will not understand what this input field is. And it will say, sorry, I will not display that thing. Or the web application might crash. Okay, it might not work properly. So again, these are the drawbacks of the positive model. Negative model. We said in the negative model, we block specific patterns and we allow everything else. So this is a compromise between security and administration complexity. Okay, because we don't have to define manually all the parameters, all the input fields, all the pages of our web application. We just say we have a database of patterns. We know that if anything falls inside these patterns, that is bad traffic. So we block it. Okay? So we have attack patterns, for example, deny meta characters like the null character that is used to bypass firewalls, IPS, WAFs, and so on. We can have custom patterns, so a pattern that you know that if it is in an input field, that pattern will be harmful for your web application. Your web developers didn't have the time to do the filtering part, so you do it with the WAF, okay, using custom patterns. So what is happening now that our Tommy O'Connor will use O'Connor in the last name, and it will click submit, and that's fine. Okay, the connection will actually go through. Okay, the request will go through because, I mean, O'Connor is not a SQL injection, all right? So it will never be trapped by a pattern. What is the problem? The problem is that the attack patterns, even if they are very, very well maintained by us, by Barracuda, they cannot trap everything. Okay, so you might have, for example, some zero-day attacks, or you might have some attacks that are still not documented that will go through. Okay, so worst case scenario, you have a security breach. That attack was successful. All right, so again, this is the compromise that you have. You want to have less administration complexity, that's fine, but you are going to sacrifice some security. Okay, now, fortunately, you can configure the WAF in either way, and the WAF is not all negative, all positive. Okay, you have to see the configuration of the WAF as a slider. Okay, you have a slider, and you can have settings that are tending towards the positive model, or settings that are tending towards the negative model. Okay, so it's not positive, negative, positive, negative. You can be in between of these models. So this will give you a lot of, let's say, elasticity in the way that you configure the WAF. You want to have more security settings for your payment page, for your payment section. That's fine. You're going to configure more positive settings, so the slider will be toward the positive model. You are protecting your home page or your about or contacts page. Who cares? Okay, you might not even have an input field over there, so you are tending towards the negative model. Okay, so this is how you basically use these theoretical models in the web application firewall. Okay, when we will do the configuration of all the security settings, I will tell you, look, listen, this is a positive mode, this is a negative model. Okay, you can basically see what is happening when you set some limits, when you set some input fields, and so on. Now, independently of the model that you are using in your security settings, the web application firewall can be used in two modes: the passive mode and the active mode. Now, if the WAF is set in passive mode, the yellow one, then whatever it is an attack will be logged, but the request will be forwarded to your web application. If you set the WAF in active mode, the attack will be blocked, but also logged. So you might be wondering, why do I need a passive mode? I mean, I want to protect my web applications. Why shall not we set the WAF in active mode from the beginning and not having a passive mode? I mean, this is what we want at the end of the day. The reason behind it that we have a passive mode is that you might want to check the logs of the WAF before you are implementing anything in the security settings. Why? Because web application firewalls can seriously damage your web application, not in terms of permanent damages, but in terms of usability. Okay? Since we are restricting the security settings of that web application, maybe that web application will not like it. So the classic example is, for example, if you have a WordPress website, everything works. Everything works with the default configuration settings. Then you try to add a new post, and the WAF will say, no, sorry, no way. Then if you analyze the log, you will see that the WAF is blocking this request because WordPress uses a lot of parameters in the URL. And by default, the WAF doesn't like it. So if you set the WAF in passive mode, you still have the time to review your configuration settings. You have the time to review the logs. You have the time to say, oh, look at that. This is a post request. It has, what I don't know, 48 parameters. Let's put 50 just to be sure in my limits. And for example, I can say there are some guys that are uploading files. How big are the files? The files are 10 megabytes big. OK, let's put a limit of 10 megabytes in our security policies and so on. And in the meantime, you can still use your web application because the WAF is not blocking this request. Then, when you are sure that your configuration is OK, it's fine, then you can put the WAF in active. As soon as you put the WAF in active, then the WAF will enforce the security settings. Okay, whatever they are, they will be enforced. Now, you will find this concept in most of the security settings of the WAF. Now, you would see this in services, and this is the main, let's say, the main switch. Okay, in the service, you can set the WAF to active or passive. Then, for most of the security settings, you can say, I want to just to put this policy in a passive mode. So the whole WAF is in active mode. It is blocking, okay, if there is an attack. But just for this policy, I want to use the passive mode. So what the WAF will do is that just for that policy, it will just log the violation of the policy and allow the request. So you still have the time to review your configuration without compromising the security of your web application, because the whole WAF is still in active mode. The service is in active mode. Okay? Now, there are some modules that are always active, no matter if you set the WAF in passive mode or active mode. For example, as we will see in a moment, we have a sub-policy that is called cookie security that will deal with cookies. Now, it doesn't matter if you have a WAF in passive mode or active mode. As soon as you configure your web application behind the WAF, cookie security is enforced. you have to explicitly turn off cookie security in order to not using it. All right? There are other use cases, like, for example, access control. Access control is active as soon as you configure it. It doesn't matter if the WAF is in active or passive mode. OK? So there are some exceptions. Let's say that for the general configuration, it works like this. Then there are some exceptions like cookie, access control, and allow deny rules, and so on. All right? Yes, this is like an IDS or an IPS, okay, as modus operandi, okay, the way that it's working, okay? It's the same concept. But as we will see in a moment, we will concentrate on the configuration, on the protection of web applications. All right? So let's do a 5 minutes break, and then we will start with security policies.